Kia ora. Welcome to Conversations with Wahine, brought to you by the Wellington branch of the National Council of Women, New Zealand.
I'm Ash, and today I'm joined with the wonderful Dr. Ellen Joan Ford. Ellen has a track record of achieving the seemingly impossible and being a force to be reckoned with. She draws on her extraordinary and varied life experiences, combined with her warm and authentic approach to bring out the best in people. Ellen has spent 10 years in the New Zealand Army, making a difference and leading soldiers on operations in New Zealand and overseas in Afghanistan, Antarctica, UK, Australia, and much of the Pacific. After the Army, she spent several years working with organizations in the corporate sector. During this time, she also completed her MBA and PhD, which focused on the experiences and social well-being of women leaders in the New Zealand Army. Welcome, Ellen. How are you?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
It's always nice to have somebody say lovely things about you, isn't it? You're like, oh, I'm not great.
No, that was very lovely, thank you.
It's just a nice way to round out the evening, is have somebody just talk about all the wonderful things you do. I'm so looking forward to chatting with you. So I guess let's start at the beginning of your career in the armed forces. What sparked your interest in joining the Army?
Oh, so actually a really clear memory. I was 10 years old and there was this advertisement on TV and it was a play on the words army and arm me. And it said things like arm me with education, arm me with skills, arm me with friends, a career, experience, blah, blah, blah. And then it finished with arm me with a future. And when I was 10, I was like, oh my goodness, the Army has got everything. That is what I'm going to do. And I did. And it did deliver.
Wow. So you were that kid who knew what she wanted to do when she was growing up. That's really, I was jealous of those kids.
Yeah, I actually did. I mean, almost a little bit narrow-minded, to be honest. I didn't even really have any fallback options. I was like, that's what I'm doing. I'm joining the Army. I then found out later on what the different kind of corps or roles that you could join in and the different programs. So decided that I wanted, the one that was the most hard to get. And so that was it. I just decided that that's what I was going to do.
Fair play. Do you think a lot of your family and friends were just like, oh, we'll see. She won't actually go through with it? Or did they know?
Well, actually, there's a couple of things. So I'm not saying this to be a wanker, but I did really well at school, so I was quite academic, and I had a lot of people be like, oh, Ellen, the Army's kind of not for, like, it's for dumb people, which is really offensive and also very incorrect. The Army absolutely does great things for all different skill levels. So that, and the other thing is, they said, oh, Ellen, you're too friendly to be in the Army. Like, if you join, it'll harden you, and it'll make you kind of hardened in a sort of a less kind way. And I'm very proud to say that the Army did not change me.
I actually think that I do agree it gets that rep, especially around, you go to the Army if you're not academic, which I totally agree is not true. I work with a lot of ex-Army individuals in my workplace, and they're so intelligent, and they're also, I genuinely think, some of the funniest people. And I just think, you have that like dark humor that comes with like law enforcement and Army work, that you just get on with everyone and you just pull your sleeves up. I just love anyone who's served in the Army.
Yay, that's really lovely to hear that. Yeah. I think military people are quite cool.
So how long did you serve in the Army for?
10 years.
Wow. Amazing.
Yes.
So you went straight from school into the Army?
Yes. Yep. So left high school, joined at 18, and I was really lucky. I actually got like a scholarship exchange to do my training on exchange in Australia. So I joined, went to Waiouru, which is New Zealand's main training ground, for not even 2 weeks, and then found out I was going on the Australian scholarship. and then that was it. Basically packed my bags and went to Australia for a number of years to do my undergraduate degree and all my military training.
Amazing. And so you did a couple of operations, I know, overseas, and one of the, I guess, most written about ones is the evacuation of 500 people from Afghanistan who aided New Zealand troops. Can you just tell us about like what that operation was and how did you get involved in it?
Yeah, so actually, there's kind of two parts to it. So when I actually was in service, so during my 10-year career, I was lucky enough I deployed to Afghanistan. So I spent 7 months there on a deployment as the engineer officer. So I had a team which had Kiwi soldiers and also Afghan locals. And actually, it was incredible. We just spent 7 months doing what felt like really meaningful work. So construction projects, both within kind of the Kiwi base and the satellite bases, as well as sort of construction projects in the community. So just sort of, I really enjoyed it. And the team really touched my heart, both, the Kiwis and the locals. And so that happened. I then left the army. And it was 10 years after that deployment, at this point as a civilian, so no longer in the army, that the Taliban had taken over in Afghanistan in 2021. And that is when effectively that the task that you just mentioned started, which I can talk about more. But yeah, it was actually, almost a decade after I'd actually finished my military service was when that task happened.
That's amazing. And so how did you get pulled into it then as a civilian?
Yeah, so it wasn't this wasn't actually a defense operation. So basically what happened is this is 3 years ago, and I remember very distinctly actually, I was on parental leave second time round. So I had Monty, my baby, who's now just turned 4, and I had Toby, who at that point was 3. And I just decided that I wasn't going to go back to my day job, which was at NZ Trade and Enterprise doing business consulting. I decided that I wanted to start my own business as a speaker and facilitator in the leadership space. And Ash, I decided I wanted to change the world. And the same month that I decided all this, that's when the Taliban took over. And it was actually one of the people who had been in my team. He basically just reached out to me in desperation, begging for help, saying effectively him and his family had fled their homes in fear of their lives. And I just remember thinking, I have no idea how to help. Like I'm just a nobody. Like I've left the army, I've got a baby, I've got a 3-year-old. I have no idea how to help you. But of course I will. I'll do whatever I can. And it just snowballed into this quite monumental volunteer task. So not a military operation. It was I was part of a volunteer team, which included Chris Parsons and Martin Dransfield, and a whole lot of other people wrapped around us. So it wasn't, it was very much a lot of people joining this effort. And yeah, we did this volunteer task and evacuated, the people that had worked in our team, plus their wives and children, to New Zealand.
I mean, it's definitely not the parental leave that most people have. Slightly more full on and stressful than I think a lot of people would do. That's it. But you know what? I think something like that speaks a lot about your character that, you're in this monumental phase of your life. You've just had your second child, and to just not even hesitate really and jump in and help people, it just speaks volumes.
Oh, wow. Look, truth be told, if I get asked it again, I think I would have to say actually no, that almost killed me last time.
Yeah.
So I almost don't want you to make me out to be nicer than I am. It was just
You've done your good deed for a while.
Yeah, I feel like I've done my bit for a little while, but it escalated. I had, when I said yes, of course I'll help you. At that point, I had no idea that this was going to take over the next almost year of my life. Had I known that, I don't know that I would have necessarily jumped in, boots and all. But I just knew I was like, I can't walk away from this. I care about these people. They worked in my team a decade ago. I knew that this was, their lives were at risk. And so, yeah, shit, what do you do? And then it is, as I say, it snowballed.
And did you and the team kind of work to get them into New Zealand, or was it different countries, or just kind of out of the immediate danger zone?
Yeah, so and just to be really clear as well, I didn't go to Afghanistan for this task. This was all done from New Zealand. And it was primarily an administration task. So our team, we actually collaborated with the government. So, this was a very much a kind of a teamed up task. So, and we had help from the media to kind of get the government to sort of agree to work with us, because that's not normally how things happen. You don't usually have a government department working with a bunch of random volunteers, but that's actually what happened. And so, we worked together over this sort of 10-month-ish journey. And basically, we got the families out via land crossings to a third country. Basically, I'm not allowed to say what the countries are, but most people can probably guess what they were. So there was a couple of different countries that bordered Afghanistan. And so our team, our kind of, I guess, the bit that we handed over was once they got to that third country. And then our government then flew them on commercial flights from there back to New Zealand. But we had to get them out. And it sounds sort of really, I don't know, sometimes people think it might have been this like cloak and daggers, dark in the night, but it was actually something that was done completely legally, in dribs and drabs, so not to, bring attention to the families crossing, but they had to have the right paperwork to get into the third country, because if they didn't and then tried to leave to come to New Zealand, they would have got kicked back to Afghanistan. So it was a noise. So we can just keep going. This is life. And in fact, I'm going to be talking about
this is work-life balance.
Actually, isn't my first podcast that I've done with kids in tow.
It's not the first one we've done with kids either.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my first preference, but yeah, I'm a single mom and I've got the kids most of the time. So this
I think a lot of parents will identify with this, the reality.
Yeah. So no. Yeah, keep going. But that's basically what we did. So as I say, very much a team effort and lots of other people around us. But we got them out to the third country, and then they were commercially flown to New Zealand.
It's amazing. And I guess thinking about your time in the army, had you an expectation of what you thought it was going to be like versus what the reality of it was?
Oh, you mean for that task, or you mean my army service?
Your army service in general.
Yeah, so actually I'm gonna say, like, massive props to the army. That ad that I mentioned, I was in the army, that's right, Toby. Quite a long time ago now. Literally the ad delivered. I had the expectations that I would learn some great skills. I knew that I was going to get my degree through the army, which is important to me. And I, had expectations that it would be a very physical role, opportunities to kind of challenge yourself. Always can you just be a little bit quiet, please? And I also had these expectations that I'd get to go overseas and help people. That was one of the reasons I wanted to join, was to serve and kind of help people in other communities. And
you definitely delivered there.
But yeah, like the army genuinely, I mean, they did deliver what my expectations of joining, and I loved it.
And so I really want to talk about your PhD, because obviously you've done a lot of study through your time in the army, and then you went on later to do a PhD talking about the social well-being of women in the army. Can you tell us a bit about, your PhD and what that involved and what you found from it?
Yeah, so I did, one second. Hey boys, you can stay in here as long as you're quiet. If you're not quiet, you need to go into the lounge.
When I ask for something.
Oh my gosh, this doesn't make me feel like Mother of the Year, that's for sure. I don't think any mother ever feels that way. But so I did my MBA as I was coming out of the army. Can you hear me okay? Or
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It's just I can hear boys. So I did my MBA as I was coming out of the army, kind of just because I felt like I wanted to upskill and have something useful on my CV, beyond the military.
Yeah.
And you had to do like a mini thesis as part of that. And I got a good mark, and it lulled me into this stupidly false sense of security that maybe I'm good at this research stuff. I thought, maybe I can do a PhD at, it can't be that much harder. I was wrong. It was a lot harder. And
That's how I did a master's. Is I did my bachelor and I was like, this is fine. Master's was not the same. I cried every day here.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, the reason I finished it is because I felt like I would regret more not finishing.
Yeah.
Not actually because I really was loving it, because that's not true. I was not. But I did. I looked at leadership because I had been a leader in the army, really interested in that topic. And I thought, okay, I'll do leadership experience as a woman because, well, I'm one, and that kind of narrows it down a little bit. And the reason I did the military was purely as just for kind of pragmatic reasons. I could access people to interview and I knew a bit about the topic. So the starting point for the research was actually more around, I wanted the qualification for my own kind of personal challenge. But then when I did the interviews and actually asked all these military women about these experiences, that's when I actually became really passionate about it. Because what I found is that the woman, just like myself, had lots of really positive things to say, and we did, but there was also these recurring themes of negative gender-based challenges. And it kind of made me, it didn't kind of ruin my memories of the army. I really love it. Loved it, and I'm proud of that service, but kind of not everything was as sunshine and rainbows as I thought. So I've got a drink of rum and coke. I've got two boys, 8:15, who I tried to get to bed, thought were asleep, and they just got excited because they could obviously hear voices and decided to come in. And
I mean, look, it's just the Irish drawl. It just draws people in.
It actually, as it does. I mean, the voice is lovely.
I'll take the blame. You know what? I'll take the blame for this one.
Oh golly. No, when you offered to reschedule, I was like, oh well, I don't know if there's any point because it'll just be the same again next time. So you may as well do this.
Honestly, I feel like you are Mother of the Year because I'm so impressed at just how chilled you are about it all.
Oh, well. Maybe I'm like one of those swans who looks around at the top.
Yeah, don't look under the surface.
Yeah.
You're completely right about, I think the army, in particular for women, has sometimes got a bad reputation. And I don't know if that's necessarily because, like a lot of things, you hear the negative more than the positive. And yeah, I just wondered what kind of that culture for women is often actually like in the forces.
Yeah, so I mean, what I'll be careful to say as well is I have now been out for 10 years.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
And my research it's certainly not out of date, but it's, I did the interviews in 2018. So I'm just, conscious that I'm hoping that things will change. In fact, it's so exciting. Our chief of army, or the new chief of army, has just been announced, and it's Rose King, the first female ever.
That's amazing. That's cool to see that we are starting to see that shift.
Yeah, I mean, so that in itself is pretty, I mean, should it be celebrated? It should just be normal, but anyway, it is, and it's amazing, and I'm excited to see what happens with that. But I think it's possible for two things to be true. So my army service and the woman that I interviewed, it was awesome. Like, that's true. There was fantastic things about it, camaraderie, the travel, the kind of amazing experiences, the opportunities. Like, there was so much good stuff, and it was wonderful. And also, there were challenges that were, very specific to being a woman. And so, yeah, so I said like all the positives, and also some of the challenges and the recurring kind of themes was that there was still very much this culture of women are kind of permitted in the military, but not necessarily valued or fully included or welcomed, to the extent that men are. There was often, this won't be a surprise, Ash, sexual harm was a massive theme that came up. And it's just not okay. But that was most certainly, one of the challenges. And there's a spectrum of sexual harm. And so often what I found in the research journey is that if we have a culture where almost, I shouldn't say low level sexual harm, nothing is okay, but almost like the kind of more sort of minor or less horrific things, if that's permitted, it makes it far more likely that the stuff at the other end of the spectrum will happen.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things. There was another theme around some of the challenges of being a parent. Now, I was not a parent when I was in the army, but given that it's a very physical role, you know, the army, you've got to be fit, you're running, you're carrying heavy packs. They had some pretty ghastly stories, actually. The way that some women, when they were pregnant or returning to work postpartum, experienced life. And I'm not saying that was every pregnant woman or every mother's experience, but there were certainly some pretty rubbish stories where they, you know, were not treated as they should have been. So that was sort of another theme. And I think the other one that was quite prevalent was around sort of leadership approach. So this is the case society-wide, it's not just the army, but I think the army can do it sort of on steroids, is we have these ideals about kind of what a good leader is, what they look like, how they conduct themselves, how they're very decisive, kind of calm, you know, regimented, specifically in the army. And that can be a really effective leadership approach, but it's not the only way. And almost all of the women I interviewed, myself included, our approach was more naturally at the other end of the spectrum. So more relationship focused, more collaborative. And we often found that we were kind of being looked at poorly because we might have a different approach to leadership. So that was, I guess they were kind of some of the big themes that came out of that PhD research.
It's so valuable to have somebody who's been in the forces and really understands, you know, the culture of the New Zealand Army, to then be able to go away and have those conversations. Because I think as well, for, you know, the women you interviewed, it can be challenging trying to explain that to a researcher versus somebody who is ex-armed forces. There's just that understanding there. So I just think, it's such a valuable piece of research to give insight. And like you say, you know, it's been quite a few years since it's been done. So hopefully we've started to see some of those cultural shifts take place now.
Yeah, and thank you for saying that. It was one of the things when you're doing a thesis, you have to kind of almost justify that you've been academically rigorous. And so being sort of a member of the group can sometimes, you know, there's less objectivity, I suppose you could say, because I was sort of an insider. But I kind of justified that actually there was a huge amount of value because of that, because the interviews were just filled with rich stories. It wasn't kind of trying to, as you say, explain to someone what it's like. You know, they know that I know what it's like. And so, you know, they could give a lot more sort of depth to the stories. So, so I guess, thank you for saying that. And I suppose the other thing is, while I'm really optimistic that I'm just an optimistic person, I think, you know, when we see problems, we can address them. But even though I'm saying, you know, my research wasn't done in 2024, you know, culture hasn't completely changed overnight. I do know that some of these issues are still issues, but I'm genuinely pleased and proud that the Army have actually implemented some of the recommendations that I made as part of this research journey.
Yeah, and it's just so important to have someone like you just being that voice. As you say, culture doesn't change overnight. You know, it's very slow to change, but when you have people that are out there advocating for it, that's what makes change happen, you know.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I get excited about lots of things. Sorry if I go all over the place, but when I was doing what happened, I did the research and then I ended up moonlighting in a kind of advisory capacity to the Chief of Army and his senior leadership team. And when I was providing these, like the findings from the research, and more importantly, the recommendations for what could be done about it, the thing that I found exciting is that the stuff that's good for women is also good for men and also good for organizational performance. It's not kind of like, oh, we're going to make it good for women, it's at the expense of men. Like, not at all. Like, this is genuinely just good lessons of leadership to make sure all of our people in our organization feel valued and included. And it's happened that my research was specifically on women, but I think it's actually just, how do we make sure everyone feels that they belong?
Yeah, I mean, it's never going to be at the expense of another group. You know, if minority groups are benefiting, everyone benefits. And it's so simple, whether it's in the army or in the wider society, that's just the case. Yeah. Well, I'm so interested because you seem like a bit of a powerhouse because you've obviously did your PhD, made these recommendations. Some of these recommendations have been taken on board. And then now you've written a book about work school hours. So I really want to get into kind of the book and what that's about. So
Yeah.
that just seems like you've now found your next challenge that you are just going to tackle and hopefully get some recommendations and changes made.
So actually, I was saying, you said I'm allowed to swear, didn't you?
Sorry.
You said it's okay if my language isn't perfectly.
Oh, go for it. Yeah, it's fine.
So I kind of sometimes talk about, I had this theme where I get pissed off and I want to do something about it. And so that was kind of, I mean, I've done this my whole life, but that the army research was probably one of the first sort of really big occasions, if that's the right thing to say. And then what happened off the back of that, I embarked on some postdoctoral research about the experiences of working parents. Now, this was not the same level of rigor as my PhD. This was more kind of unintentional research. Just all these parents started telling me their stories, and I just kept hearing the same stories over and over. And so what I found is, so just very briefly, the parents basically, their stories fitted into one of three categories. They either, one, couldn't make work, and were forced out of the workforce. And I'm not talking about people that consciously choose to be with their children full time. I'm meaning people that wasn't actually their preference. They were kind of forced out because the juggle was just too much, or the cost of childcare didn't really stack up. So that was number one. The second category were parents that worked full time, and then they talked about missing their children. They weren't there for school collection. They didn't get to spend time during the school holidays, swimming sports, school cross countries. That wasn't something that they were able to attend. So that was kind of like miserable outcome number two. And then the third one were parents that worked part-time. But what that meant in practice is that they had a part-time contract and therefore part-time hours. But what was required of them, their outputs, their KPIs, their responsibilities, remained exactly the same.
Yeah.
And so what happened is they did do some work outside of their paid hours, but mostly they just got really efficient. They got their stuff done in less time. So say 25, 30-hour contracts, delivering the same as their 40-hour colleagues. And they told me how lucky they felt. Like, gosh, I'm so lucky that I'm allowed to work part-time. Oh, I'm so grateful for this, wonderfully lucky situation that I'm in. And I was like, this is bullshit. There's nothing lucky about getting a pay cut to do the same job.
Yeah.
Like this is societal wide gaslighting.
Yeah.
And so that is how my movement #WorkSchoolHours was born, because I was like, this is dumb. None of those three appeal. I love my kids so much, but I don't want to be with them 24/7. I like being in the workforce. I don't want to do all the hours and miss stuff with the kids. And I'm sure as shit not going to be paid less money to do the same amount of work. So it kind of started more on my personal front. I was like, this is the life ahead of me. I remember a lot happened during my parental leave of my second child, by the way, Ash. So I, was still breastfeeding Monty. I had a 3-year-old and was like, this is so dumb. Like, this is the life ahead of me and I don't want it. I don't want this for me and I don't want this for other people. So pissed off, I'm going to do something about it. That's how #WorkSchoolHours was born. I basically started researching, like, why do we do work the way we do it? If we had a blank slate today, no one would say, let's put all the adults on this schedule and the kids, we'll put them on a different one.
When you say it like that, it's so obviously stupid. It's going back to a time when women were not working and were expected to be in the home, and it doesn't work anymore. That's not the way our society typically is.
Yeah, so literally the kind of the 9 to 5 that came into play more than a century ago. And it was great social progress at the time, but it was based on the assumption that the person working 9 to 5 was not the same person picking up the kids from school at 3 o'clock or spending 12 weeks of the year with them on school holidays. Kind of like they were two different people. And so we live in this world where we're expected to parent as if we don't have jobs, and we're expected to work as if we don't have kids. And I just think it's bonkers. And so, I just started looking at, well, maybe we could do work differently. And so I started kind of furiously writing down my ideas on, and it was all, based on leadership. So it was using my army leadership experiences, corporate leadership, and my research on leadership, all around, okay, well, what do we actually need to deliver great outcomes for our organizations? What do we actually need to make money? So this was a business proposition. And actually, if we focus more on outputs, not hours, and if we give people more flexibility, and if we actually value that they've got stuff beyond work, could be children, but actually it could be anything, we're going to get better outcomes for our people. And so that is why I wrote the book, which I'm very excited about. It came out this year. And I did a TED talk a couple of years ago, so that's on my website. And it's all about this principle-based concept called #WorkSchoolHours, and just, how the working world can be better for everybody.
It's when you say it, it's so simple, but we've seen similar research now with unlimited annual leave.
Mm-hmm.
Companies that offer that, staff actually don't take any more leave than normal because they're like, oh, well, it's there. I'm not watching it. If I need to, I can take it. But they actually don't. And it's the same thing. I'm like, if you give people the flexibility, they don't take advantage of it. Most workers are there and want to do a good job.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes when I get pushback for that, so people will say kind of what you're just implying. They're like, oh, people might take the piss or some will milk it. And I'm like, the people that would milk that system are the same people that are milking the current system right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, don't think that those people aren't already doing it. And also, as you say, they're such a tiny portion of the workforce. Yeah. Most people actually want to show up and deliver value. There's not that many people who are like, I just want to be a half-ass employee who adds no value. Yeah, that's not how most people are wired.
And have you had much pushback in general, or do you think people have stopped and it's made them think?
Yeah, so actually okay, I'm really excited on this one. Am I allowed to brag slightly?
Please brag.
So
it's your time to brag.
So here's the book, and I'm very excited about it. But the thing that I'm genuinely like the most excited about is I've got I do things full on. So when my publisher said, Ellen, you need to get people to endorse it, I didn't realize they only meant you need a handful. So I just sent it out to like every big business that I could not every, but a lot. And I got amazing endorsements from business leaders, like CEO of KiwiBank, people at EY, KPMG, farming leaders who have said, actually, this makes good business sense. And so to your question, have I got a lot of pushback? I mean, yes, I do get pushback, but that's more when they just hear #WorkSchoolHours and they're like, oh, that's stupid. Like, you can't work 9 till 3. I'm like, no, but okay, yes, the title is more of a draws you in, but when you actually hear what it's about, and it's a principles-based approach, and it's about applying the principles where you can, actually it makes good business sense. And so I'm excited to say that, I do have really good endorsements from business leaders, and this is, so my goal is not to flog books, although I hope you buy the book because I think it's great content in there. But my business is as a speaker and as a facilitator. So I do keynotes and I facilitate workshops in the leadership space. And I always, #WorkSchoolHours is always, I mention it, within this. And I'm not saying the entire audience is, nodding their head thinking, yes, wow, Ellen's perfectly correct. I would be very arrogant to assume that. But most of the audience is like, yeah, okay, she's got a point here.
And it's like when you're trying to get to the bank and you're like, but the bank is only open the hours that I'm in the office. And if I'm in the office, I can't get to the bank. So what are we doing here?
Yeah. Like, it's sort of, like when I stand on stage talking, like it kind of is common sense. Like I'm actually, I don't want to oversell it. Like, I'm actually not saying anything particularly, brainy or rocket surgery type. Is that even the saying? Brain surgery, whatever the saying is. Yeah, clearly I'm not that smart because I'm just saying stuff that just kind of makes sense. And yeah, more and more businesses. And what is cool, because I've been doing this for a while now, and in my book, I've got lots of practical examples from a whole lot of different industries around how you can apply this. And it's just sometimes just little stuff like only have team meetings during school hours.
Oh my, yes. We had a perfect example of that last week. We had an all of staff meeting at 3:30, and half the team couldn't make it, or we were trying to dial in the car trying to pick up kids. I was like, what are you doing? Why are you putting it on when everyone's going to pick up kids from school?
Yeah. It's just like and if you've always been doing it that way, I get it. People it doesn't occur to them. And that doesn't make them bad people.
Yeah.
But once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so that's one of my goals, is to help people see this and then be like, oh my gosh, yes, team meetings, they should be between, I don't know, 9:30 and 2:30.
But I think coming at it from that leadership approach is so smart, because it really has to be that top-down approach in an organization for it to work. Because if a leader implements that, I mean, it'll flow quickly through the organization. And as a parent, I can imagine you would want to work for a company who values the fact that you need to log off and, pick up your kids. That's just good sense. That's going to keep loyalty for your workers as well.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I could go on about this for hours, so just, cut me off when we need to, Ash. But like the business benefits are so significant. And one of the biggest is around attracting and retaining great talent. Yep. So and I mean, of course, there's always exceptions. But generally speaking, when people have experienced flexibility, they will not go back.
Yeah.
So I have now, and I actually had brilliant flexibility where I was at Trade and Enterprise. I then realized how unique my situation was.
Yeah. I
then decided I want to change the world, start my own business. So obviously I do have a lot of autonomy with my hours, because it is my own business. But I can't see any part of my future that looks like me going back to a 9-to-5 job. I value flexibility so much, being able to, I'm there for not every single school pickup, but the absolute majority of them. I get to go to, I'm going to say, I don't know, 80% of the school activities. I mean, some of them are a bit boring and I maybe skip those ones, but, like swimming, sports, cross countries, like I'm there for it. And school holidays, if I've got a speaking booking, well, then I take the kids with me. Like it just becomes part of it. And I would never go back. And I've interviewed so many parents who have said the exact same thing. Once they've had a taste of flexibility, they won't go back. And even people that have walked away from significant, have gone, what am I trying to say? Have taken a massive pay reduction in order to get flexibility, because that is so valuable to them. So,
you can't put a price on that.
Yeah.
It's not a dollar figure that you can put a price on. It's just invaluable, and it's time you don't get back. That's the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really, really interesting, because I've worked for where I am now. It's very flexible and, really family first. But I have worked in an organization which was very rigid. And I mean, you had to ask permission to pop out to, grab something from the shop. And I could never go back to that. It's just no way to live. And I also think, oh, hello.
Hey, Toby. You're doing great. You are going to get a treat, because you guys have been.
I promise. I'm going to let your mom go in a few minutes, and I hear there's a treat for you.
There you go. I mean, look at it. I'm telling him he's been so good. It's 8:30 at night, Toby. No, you should be.
Toby's the star of the show.
Yeah.
But the other thing on that is, I think a lot of parents often think, oh, I'm going to need to work flexible while the kids are young. Once they start school, it's going to get easier. But it doesn't. And I don't have kids, but from a lot of my friends who do, they actually say, the older the kids get, especially in those teenage years, they're like, that's when you need to be at home and have that flexibility, because they just need you so much more, but don't want to ask for it. So it's not something that you want to walk away of. Once kids are in school, you're like, right, I can go back to like that grueling rigid hours. Like you want that flexibility as your kids grow.
Yes. And again, we're speaking from the experiences we have, right? So I've got little kids. I'm not there yet, but from the research from other parents who have older kids, they said exactly what you just said then, that the teenage years are when they really want to be there. And even just so daycare in some ways, it can actually be easier, because you can drop your kids off at daycare at 7 a.m. and have them there till 6 p.m, 5 days a week. And you can do that the entire year. School finishes at 3, and then it's got 12, 13 weeks of school holidays. And then they have, there's Teachers Only Day, and there's just all these other things.
Yeah.
I found, and the other thing is, sorry, I'm slightly tangenting here. Tangenting, is for a lot of us, and it does, I know women typically think about this more front of mind, but I'm meeting more and more young men when I do these talks who are like, this is at the front of their mind too, about what they want to be. And these are people who don't yet have kids, but think actually this is going to be part of their life at some point in time. And I mean, I remember myself so I didn't have kids until I was 32 and 35. But in my 20s, I was already consciously thinking about, how am I going to make this work?
Yeah.
I want to have kids one day. I want to keep working. And I don't actually know how that's,
It feels impossible. And I think it's a lot of people are really hesitant, not only and a lot of it comes down to the financial, inflation, cost of living is going up. You can't afford to not work, but how do you then balance that with kids? And a lot of people, it can be a deciding factor to not have them.
Yeah. And it's and one of the things I'm very big on is this is all about people having choice. So there are people that choose not to have kids, brilliant. There are people that choose to work completely full time, awesome. Or they choose not to, awesome. Like, this is all about people having choice. But what I do think at a kind of like at a macro level, we need people to breed. If we want a human race to continue, if we want a future workforce, we need, not everyone, but we need, a chunk of the population to be making children. And there are, I might not get my stats perfectly right here, but there are some countries that are going backwards in population.
Yeah.
Because of exactly the point you just said then. They're just like, it's just too expensive and too stressful. And that becomes a factor in deciding not to have kids. Or hi, Monty. Or the other thing that is quite heartbreaking, Ash. Oh, thank you, Monty. They happen to be really adorable when they're not supposed to be awake. But the thing that was quite heartbreaking as well, Ash, is I spoke to, and I read this in other articles as well, women who are, say, in their 40s who haven't had kids, and then they've, biologically, it's tricky, right? We do have a biological clock, and they've left it too late, and they've missed the opportunity for work, and then have just, been forever regretful that they did that.
And as you say, it's all choice, and no one should be forced to make such a difficult choice because of something like, I don't think I can make my work hours work for a family. Like, it just seems like such a ridiculous position to be put in this day and age. Like, really, with remote working and everything, like, we can't make it flexible.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many people who literally are making decisions about, do I prioritize work? Do I have a family? And I'm like, we should be able to have both.
Yeah.
Because, the saying, like, you should be able to have your cake and eat it, because what is the point of having cake if you can't eat it?
Exactly.
So, yeah, and I just think
it's so interesting.
Yeah, so I am sorry. I do, well, I mean, I say sorry, but it's also, this is life, right? Here I am effectively working by being on a podcast.
I mean, this is the perfect ad for it. Yeah, it's like, it's work-life balance right here.
Yeah, it's just, this is the reality. And I think there's a lot of, and because I'm preaching this stuff, so I am practicing what I preach. Do I get it perfect all the time? Absolutely not. But I'm trying to be more like, and even though I did just say sorry, because I tried to take it back, is not apologizing for the fact that I'm a mum or a parent. So yeah, I'm here to have a conversation. I do also have kids, and they're up. That's life. That doesn't mean that I'm kind of less than or a poor performer. And I know that is the kind of culture that so many people live in, that they feel like, if their kids are sick or it impacts them, their work in some way, that they feel terrible about themselves.
Yeah.
Instead of us being like, you know what, as a whole population, we need people to have kids, some people at least. It's one of the most natural things in the world. It's going to happen. So why are we having a workforce that makes it so freaking difficult to do that?
And why are we shaming people for it? Everyone is just doing their best. And it just comes to that, back to that idea of bringing your whole self to work.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's kids or mental health issues, illnesses, you shouldn't feel ashamed or feel like you have to compensate for anything. Like, this is who you are, and the more workplaces embrace that and support you, the better we all benefit from it.
Oh, absolutely. And just again, it's commercially smart.
Yeah.
People, like the people that do have the flexibility, as we said, first of all, won't want to go back to somewhere else, but they don't. They feel so like genuine, like this is amazing. My boss gives a shit about me as a whole person who has commitments outside of work. Could be children, could be something else, could be a personal illness, could be a personal goal, it could be study, it could be whatever it is. But if you actually value people as whole humans, they'll then do their best work for you.
Yeah.
Like
it's as you say, it's not revolutionary, but it's just, I think it just takes someone like you to get up there and say the obvious. It's just, and get people to stop and think, like, why are we trying to fit a square peg into a round hole? Like, this doesn't work anymore. What are we doing?
Yeah. And so that's my goal. And Ash, I'm so sorry. I feel like these kids are.
I've loved it. Look, let's be honest. I was here for Monty and Toby. It's just, I have to chat to you. Like, they were the real people I wanted to talk to tonight.
Oh, yeah. Well, Monty, my 4-year-old, is Mr. Performer, so he'd love to hear that. No, but this is sorry. So yes, I will have to go in a second. But I'm really passionate about this. I genuinely believe that the working world can be better than what it is. And it can be done in a way that's good for people, all people, and organizations. And it's kind of become my life mission, actually.
It's a good life mission. And I think it's one everyone would be happy to get behind. I've loved chatting with you. You're such an engaging speaker, and your passion in any of the work you've done, it just floods through the screen. It's so, just amazing. It's just really energizing. That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
For anyone who wants to learn more about you and get you as a facilitator, buy your book, which you all should buy the book, where can they find you? Where can they get the book?
Oh, yay. Thank you. So everything's on my website. And my website is my name, ellenjoanford.com. So everything's on there. I mean, I'm on the social media. Gosh, that makes me sound old. I'm on LinkedIn is my main kind of social media platform. And my website, ellenjoanford.com. And on there is lots of information about the stuff I do as a speaker and a workshop facilitator. But the book is on there. I've got online courses on there as well, and there's free resources as well. My TED Talk. So yeah, there's lots of stuff on there, and thank you for saying buy the book. I mean, I really do. I do want people to buy the book. I want them to read it, and not just read it and think. I want them to read it and think and do something. But genuinely, the goal isn't to sell books. The goal is to change the freaking world.
What a note to end on. I love that. Ellen, it's been so amazing talking to you. I don't care what you say, you are a super mom, because I've never met anyone who's so chilled. You have the cutest children. They were so adorable, but I do feel personally responsible that you must go and give them chocolate, even though it is 8 p.m.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I promised them it now, so now I have to go and fulfill that promise, and then, reap the consequences of doing so.
Yeah, I feel like I should get some of the consequences, so I'm really sorry I won't be there to ensure it if it all goes wrong.
Oh, no, awesome. Hey, thanks, Ash. This is fun. I know I really was looking forward to doing this, so thank you.
Thanks so much, Ellen. It's been great.
Thank you.